Welcome back. Some election officials have said that what is important is that Nigerians get a government, and certainly our guests agree with that, even if the voting process was less than perfect. They argue that Nigeria has much more important problems. Corruption, it's one of the world's worst. It is estimated that Nigeria lost as much as $380 billion to corruption between 1960 and 1999. That's about the same as all Western aid given to the entire continent of Africa in about the same period. Now, corruption feeds other problems. Despite billions in oil revenues, millions of Nigerians lack access to roads, electricity and healthcare. 1 in 5 infants don't reach their 5th birthday. Life expectancy, one of the world's lowest, just 43 years of age. And then there's the violence. Clan warfare, crime gangs and ethnic violence have seen tens of thousands die in the last decade. Now, nowhere is the challenge of violence more critical than in the Niger Delta, the source of the nation's oil wealth. Lucy Ashton has more on that.
Here, in the creeks and swamps of the greatest river in West Africa, militiamen have been waging a war against the Nigerian authorities. They call themselves Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta, or MEND for short. What they want is 50% of the profits of the millions of dollars of oil extracted from the Delta every day. Little of that money stays here. Most people survive on a few $100s a year. So the industry is under attack. MEND has managed to shut down 1/5 of all Nigerian oil production. Car bombs have exploded in Port Harcourt. Pipelines have been sabotaged all over the Delta. And entire oil rigs have been besieged. Many Nigerians have died in the violence, but foreigners are what MEND is really after. Last year alone, they abducted more than 70, taking 40 more in the first 2 months of this year. All were ransomed. All were released unharmed, but for one who was killed in the abduction. The Navy is trying to fight back, trying to protect the oil. But for now, MEND is just too quick. Their knowledge of the creeks too good, and their ranks are swelling with embittered recruits. MEND might say it's fighting for the common people, but the other side of this conflict is that it's having a severe effect on voting. The entire area is just too dangerous for observers, making results in the Delta, much like its future, uncertain at best.
Mr. Shane, just a taste of what's happening in the Delta there. Who's going to be man enough to tackle that problem?
First of all, I think I'd like to correct the impression that Nigeria receives international aid from foreign countries. I don't think this is the case at all. I mean, grants have been given maybe to some African countries, but I don't think Nigeria is a beneficiary of this or has ever been a beneficiary of this. Now, what we have on ground is it's a very difficult mix of very different people. It's a country of about 400 separate ethnic nations, and there is so much at stake because of the natural resources of the country, which has not been tapped. And that's one of the reasons why people would basically want these elections conducted with and done with, so that the country can actually address the key problems we're facing. I mean, it is the biggest oil producer
in the continent, and yet the majority of people walk around without phones. There are no roads, there's no infrastructure.
Yes, as you rightly pointed out, the reporter rightly pointed out in his report, not a lot of the money stays in the area where the money is made from, that's the Niger Delta. But what he refused to point out as well is that not a lot of the money actually stays in Nigeria, the country. Most of it finds its way outside of the country. And it's the people that are agitating and fighting, you start to think maybe there's a bit more. They were fighting for 13%, they got it, of the derivation of the country. They're now fighting for 50%. Now, if they get 50%, would they stop or would the violence continue? It might not exactly be a fight for the control of resources. I think there might be a lot more than that. And the way the country is structured is going to take more than just one person to effect a change. There needs to be a consensus of Nigerians themselves coming together to fashion a way of solving the problems of the resources that come from the country.
Mr. Noor, you can see from your position that those resources are certainly not going to those people there in the Delta. How are you going to see this playing out in the elections? We know that MEND says it doesn't consider these elections fair and is refusing to take part.
Yeah, men's position is that the election should hold, and if it holds, they're not going to be binding on the results of the election. I would like to remind you, before the election, they actually started attacking some police stations in Port Harcourt, saying that election should not hold. So their stand actually is that the election should not hold. There is no basis to which it should hold, and if it is eventually held, they won't be binding. And because they feel that even the new leader, the leader may not really make a difference. So they really want this particular administration to put a kind of framework of what should be done, either to agree on the 50% derivation thing before the government exits, or concede to some of their demands, and which is not done yet. But the present government, what it's doing is putting infrastructures together there and creating avenue for more employment in the area and all that. So
okay, another area of problem, excuse me interrupting you there, Mr. Nkrumah, is up in the north. We've seen an increase in violence there. Is Islamic militancy on the rise in the north, and if so, why?
Well, Islamist militancy is on the rise, I believe, in the north, but I think that the worst trouble spot is the oil-producing Niger Delta, where, of course, it's a largely Christian and animist area. I think that in the north, much of the violence is centered around the promulgation of Sharia, Islamic Sharia law. And as you know, 12 states, 12 northern predominantly Muslim states, have applied Sharia law, instituted them. However, there are 36 states, so a large number of Muslims do not abide by the Sharia law, and the constitution itself of Nigeria is a secular constitution. I believe that much of the violence was this week came about because of the murder of, or assassination rather, of Imam Ja'far Adam. And I think that there is a lot of talk about connections with Al-Qaeda and other
I'm going to have to interrupt you there because we're going to have to go. There are fears of more violence in the country as this plays itself out. Mr. Felix Anua in Nigeria, thank you for your time. Ola Shane in London and Gamal Nkrumah in Cairo. Thank you as well, our viewers, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story again. We do welcome your comments and suggestions, so please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the entire team here, goodbye for now.